I'm interested to know more about you. What were the conditions under which you developed your mind as a young person, and how do you continue to do that even today?
Fun question. I think one of the key defining things for me was I was homeschooled throughout most of my childhood. And the reason for it was my parents were educational philosophers, theorists, and they had the idea that if kids were given pretty much no curriculum, but exposed to as many things as possible, and then their interests were facilitated, that they would kind of blossom in the unique way that they were most innately suited to. And so it was an educational theory experiment. And so I had no curriculum at all. Never did handwriting, spelling, state capitals, and it happens to be those three are good examples of things that I never learned well. Spell checking later taught me how to spell and made the fact that my handwriting is illegible tolerable. And I don't have state capitals. But I was fascinated by all of the sciences. I was fascinated by all the philosophic disciplines. And so I got to start working in understanding modern physics as a little bitty kid, and Eastern and Western schools of philosophy, and et cetera. And one of the other cool things was not having subject divisions. I didn't know there were subject divisions. So there was no arbitrary break between physics and chemistry, or chemistry and biology, or any of the disciplines. So we'd be, as a little kid, I'd ask a question like, why is the sky blue? And part of that answer has to do with the physics of diffraction and the molecule size of the upper atmosphere. That means you have to understand sun and stars and solar formation and atmospheric chemistry and how diffraction works and the physics of light waves and the actual molecules in the upper atmosphere. But it also means you have to understand how a retina works and what subjective blue is and what is the difference between subjective blue and objective blue, and then the hard problem of neuroscience. And like all of that comes in to really answer that well. Almost everything was a movement between various sciences and then getting into the deep philosophy that grounded the sciences where the hard problems were. And so that led to a interdisciplinary and systems orientation to understanding the nature of reality that we live in. And of course, for me, it was always implicit that because understanding early on evolutionary theory, the universe was going somewhere. And it was organizing itself towards more orderly complexity. And with that more ordered complexity, new emergent properties. With more evolved physiologies, there were new capacities of consciousness. And so it was clear that something like we had a role to serve in participating with that evolutionary impulse of the universe. And as the one creature here that we know has the abstraction capacity with our certain structures of prefrontal cortex to understand evolution itself, right? To not just be a part of the grand design, but be able to think about the whole thing, the direction of evolution, the principles of it, that we really have the meaningful capacity to consciously participate with it. And looked like the evolutionary impulse is evolving everything, all of the universe. So my interest early was, how do I understand universe? How do I understand where it's going and how to help participate with the evolution of everything? So that also looked like activism in terms of how to actually support the evolution of quality of life for all sentient things.
Yeah.
And one thing I'll add, because it's so important for people to know, is that for the most part, when kids ask questions that they're really interested in, like why is the sky blue and we don't really understand the answer, we don't facilitate the interests well. And then we try to force them to be interested in, or at least do shit that they're really not interested in at all. And the process of forcing them to do uninteresting things while not facilitating interest is what breaks people's interest in life. And then you have to extrinsically motivate them with money or reward or whatever, and otherwise they want to chill and watch TV or play video games. But if people's intrinsic fascination with life gets fed and facilitated, then they are innately and ongoingly highly agentic by nature.
Your background is particularly interesting to me. We are seriously considering homeschooling our 4-year-old boy. Hearing you explain your background is motivating to me, and that this is indeed a good course to pursue. I was a solid student growing up, but I became a much better student later when I found myself in learning environments where I had more freedom to do things like, for example, spend long periods of time on a subject versus changing my focus every 50 minutes like you do in most schools. So for me, changing class that frequently was really disruptive. I'm more of a type of a learner where I like to go deep. I build momentum and then I want to stick with a subject for a while. And then also whatever typically has my attention has all of it. So I would do very well in some classes and just okay in others. Also, the more I advanced my own education, I had the freedom to learn more about how I learn And if I knew some of these things earlier in life, my ability to advance my own knowledge with the effort I was putting in, I think would have been greatly accelerated. So for my boy Desmond, I think about how to create this custom learning experience that adaptively contours to his interests, a way to always harness that natural curiosity that we have as children and to empower that love of learning by all means necessary. So it's really nice to hear about your experience and that you look back on it with appreciation.
Now think about this. Technological unemployment is going to end something like 30% of all jobs in the next 15 years.
Mm-hmm.
It's going to start with a lot of labor jobs, but it's going to move with AI to a lot of non-labor jobs. When we think about the history of education, if a kid was going to grow up and take over the family business or the family work, whatever that was, so they had to kind of learn how to do those things from a skill vocation point of view, or then it became more infrastructuralized and they were going to just get some job within infrastructure, within macroeconomy, they had to be prepared for the workforce. The workforce is going to get progressively more and more automated by the time that people who are kids now will be moving into what we would have called the workforce previously.
Mm-hmm.
And what will be unique is things that are uniquely human. And so if there are things that robots can learn to do well and AI can learn to do well, and obviously there's a deep question around strong AI, but let's just take strong AI off for now. The things that are uniquely human are going to be the only things that are really adaptive for humans to do. They also happen to be the things that are most fascinating and fun and intrinsically rewarding for humans to do. So this has always been a relevant conversation, but it is relevant in a way that it never has been right now.